be starting with a prayer, and I'll ask our brother, Dr. Henry Breguet, who's the Vice Chancellor, Livingstone International University, prefers to be called that he's a good Christian. Can you come and give us a prayer? Then we go in for the anthems. You have to come over podium.
Good afternoon. Let us humble ourselves and pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so very much this afternoon for this opportunity of giving us to meet as academicians and other people with the potential to help the education sector to continue to grow and develop. We thank you so much for NCHE and the leadership of Professor Executive Director for organizing, and I want to pray for your blessings. I want to thank you for the gift of life for all of us and the journey masses that we have received as we travel from different places to come and be part of this conference, a public lecture to celebrate 20 years of operation for the National Council for Higher Education. We praise your name, and I want to pray also for those who are still on their way so they can meet us, and together we can be part of this public lecture, and I know we are going to be inspired and to learn more on finances and how to invest for higher education. I want to pray for all the speakers and the panelists and all of us participants so that we can interact in a way that will build each one, so that, Father, whatever we do will bring glory to your name, but also allow each institution to continue to be developed in a way that will meet the needs of the country and also the needs of those institutions. We praise you and honor you, for it is in Jesus' name that we pray and believe. Amen.
I thought such a prayer deserves a clap. Can we stand up for the anthems? Thank you. You can take your seats. On behalf of the National Council for Education, we want to invite all of you to this great occasion to celebrate 20 years of existence of a National Council of transforming higher education in this country. These celebrations were launched on 9th of March by the First Lady and Minister of Education, Honorable Janet Katam Museveni, at Speak Resort Munyonyo, and it included a number of activities, among which is this public lecture, that we should be able to discuss today. And I was actually checking today's paper. If some of you read the headlines in one of the papers today, there was a headline saying a number of students who are the key stakeholders cannot get their transcripts because of public debt. And I said, how God works, is it God? I don't know. And I know the keynote speaker will be able to expound on that, how it coincided with the celebration of this today's theme. I want to welcome former council members, Chair of Council. There is a number of former council members who are here. I know ED will be able to recognize them at a later time. I see a number of vice chancellors. I see a number of people who have made contribution to transformation of higher education. And just to remind you that the National Council opened its doors on the 1st of March 2003, after the enactment of the Act, Universities and Other Tertiary Institutions Act in 2001. And this morning I was talking to a colleague, Dr. Martin now, and he showed me the first publications of how many universities we had then. And you can't believe that we had 3 universities: Makerere University, Chambogo University, and Islamic University in Uganda. Now, I know ED will give us the current position, but you can see the real transformation. The gross enrollment ratio was then 4.1%. Yes, it has not moved much, but at least it has been able to move. And therefore, each one of us has made a brick, has made a contribution towards the celebration and transforming higher education in this country. You're most welcome to Serena Hotel. And for administrative purposes, in case you want to make a short call, you just get out. For gentlemen on your right, that's if you're using the way I'm facing, and for ladies on the left. And our team outside will be able to help you. And at this moment, I want you to feel at home. If you have not greeted a neighbor, at least say hello to you. Because at least they know they can speak some English because they are in higher education. I know some of you are too serious. You don't want to be seen. At least say hello to them. And at this moment, let me take this singular honor to invite our beloved ED, Professor Mary J.N. Okwakol, the third CEO after the founding ED, Professor Abdul Kasozi, was replaced by Professor Opoda Sibo, and she has been able to take it up from there. And I can assure you, and a number of staff will agree with me, she has made a fundamental change building on the earlier blocks. And Professor, come and welcome your guests.
The keynote speaker, Dr. Joseph Muvawala, Executive Director of the National Planning Authority, the representative of the Permanent Secretary to the Treasury, the Permanent Secretary and Secretary to the Treasury, Mr. Muhumuza, who is also a panelist, representatives of embassies and high commissions, the chairperson of the National Council for Higher Education, Professor Katunguka, members of the NCHE Council present, the panelists and key discussants, the moderator, Mr. Robert Kabushenga, senior officials from the Ministry of Education and Sports, directors and staff of NCHE, heads of departments and agencies present, vice chancellors and principals, distinguished participants, both those who are here physically and online, the media fraternity, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the National Council for Higher Education, NCHE, I warmly welcome you all to today's public lecture, which forms part of the 20th anniversary celebrations. I would like in a special way to appreciate Dr. Joseph Muvawala, the Executive Director of the National Planning Authority, for accepting our request to deliver a keynote address amidst his busy schedule. Thank you very much, Dr. Muvawala. In the same vein, I thank Mr. Ramadan Gobi, represented here by Mr. Muhumuza, Dr. Florence Nakaiwa Maega, Professor Waswa Balunywa, Dr. Ruth Biyinzika Kasolo, and Dr. Fred Muhumuza for accepting to play the important role of panelists, and Mr. Robert Kabushenga for accepting to moderate the program of the lecture. All, as you know, are very busy people. We appreciate your honoring our invitation. Thank you very much. The National Council for Higher Education was established by an Act of Parliament, the Universities and Other Tertiary Institutions Act 2001, and was mandated to regulate and guide the establishment of and management of higher education institutions, as well as regulate the quality of higher education, equate qualifications, and advise government on higher education matters. It started operations in January 2003, and as such has been in existence for 20 years. Ladies and gentlemen, we are adults now. The 20th anniversary is a major milestone, and as such, we are holding celebrations during this year under the theme, I quote, 20 years of NCHE transforming higher education in Uganda, unquote. The celebrations were launched by the First Lady and Minister of Education and Sports on the 9th of March this year, and the public lecture under the theme Financing of and Investment in Higher Education in Uganda is part of the continuation of the celebrations, which will culminate into a grand celebration later this year. We thank God for bringing us this far. The celebrations offer an opportunity for reflection on both the successes and challenges of NCHE in the last 2 decades of executing its mandate and transforming higher education in the country. The discussion here will interrogate the financing of higher education, which is considered to be a central issue in unlocking opportunities for all stakeholders in the subsector. African countries and their development partners have placed great emphasis on primary and more recently secondary education. but most of them have neglected higher education as a means to improve economic growth and mitigate poverty. The Dakar Summit on Education for All in 2000, for example, advocated only for primary education as a driver of social welfare. It left higher education in the background. The role of higher education cannot be neglected. Organizations such as the World Bank and major donor agencies have considered that higher education has a significant positive impact on economic development. The report published by the World Bank in 1999 shows how developing countries can use knowledge to narrow the income gap with rich world economies. Along with UNESCO, the World Bank then convened a task force on higher education and society, and it was concluded that higher education is essential to developing countries economically. The development of countries like India, Singapore, and Malaysia, among others, is attributed to the development of higher education. According to Uganda's Vision 2040, higher education contributes to achieving of the Vision 2040 through the development of improved technology, knowledge transfer, research, support to innovation, and increased productivity, which are all important if Uganda is to achieve that Vision 2040. It is in consideration of this that NDP 3 provides for strengthening NCHE and higher education institutions through increased funding and staffing to improve quality assurance in universities and other institutions of higher learning. This is further supported by the National Planning Authority projections on budget allocations for NCHE in the Program Implementation Action Plan under the Human Capital Development Program. Higher education is undoubtedly underfunded in both public and private institutions. This underfunding is hindering the full exploitation of the benefits of higher education to economic transformation of this country. The underfunding is symptomized by the low enrollment, which is estimated at 268,686 in 2020-2021, resulting into gross enrollment ratio, GER, of 5.9%, which is much below the sub-Saharan average of 9.4%. NCHE is engaging you as key higher education experts and key stakeholders to examine the importance of finance and investment as the fundamental enablers of the subsector in Uganda, and also provide a platform for reviewing, developing, and implementing appropriate higher education financing and investment strategies that will enable the delivery of quality higher education in Uganda. We appreciate the efforts of government in funding higher education and the donors that have stood with the government in funding higher education and investing in the subsector. Our gratitude also goes to private providers of higher education for choosing to invest in higher education. However, a lot is still needed, given the increasing demand for higher education in the country, which is being dictated by the increasing population. We are very grateful to the Parliamentary Committee on Education and Sports and that on budget for supporting appropriation of funds to the National Council for Higher Education and indeed to other players in the higher education subsector. I'm aware that not only do they appropriate budgets to public institutions, but some private institutions have benefited. Allow me to take this opportunity to thank the Minister of Education and Sports for the support and policy guidance given to the National Council for Higher Education always. Thank you. The Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development for timely release of funds. The Accountant General for guidance on the management of the funds that are allocated, and the National Planning Authority for the support and timely approvals of the National Council for Education's strategic plans. At this juncture, I wish to sincerely thank the chairperson, Professor Erika Tunguka, and members of the Council for the guidance given to management in the execution of their duties. And I would like to request our chairperson to stand up for recognition, Professor Katunguka. I'd also like to request the members of council present to stand up for recognition. We are celebrating 20 years, and my appreciation would not be complete without thanking the former chairpersons and council members and managements of the time. I would like to request the former former council members. I'm aware that the chairpersons may not be here, but council members, former council members who are here. Thank you for coming. We appreciate the institutions of higher education for the invaluable contributions you make to higher education. And to this end, I would like to request all vice chancellors present to stand up for recognition. I would like to request all principals, and when I say vice chancellors or whoever, your representatives, if you are not here, all principals or their representatives present, please stand up for recognition. Permit me to acknowledge with appreciation the commitment and support of colleagues in management and the staff, collectively called the NCHE family, that have contributed to NCHE's attainment of the achievements we are celebrating and the various contributions towards transforming higher education in Uganda. And I would like to request members of the NCHE family, wherever you are, to stand up for recognition. Thank you. The same appreciation goes to those who have served before us. And here again, let me request all those colleagues who served at the National Council for Higher Education to stand up for recognition. Former staff, former members of management. Thank you. The organizing committee, headed by the NCHE Acting Deputy Executive Director and Director for ICT Research and Innovation, Dr. Nora Mulira, has worked very hard to ensure actualization of the lecture. Please stand up for recognition. All members of this committee, I thank you. I thank the committee for a job well done. And I thank all of you, our esteemed invited guests, who have come from all walks of life, and those online, for gracing this public lecture. Finally, I wish to assure you all that we at the National Council for Higher Education are committed to contributing to the transformation of our society towards achieving Uganda's Vision 2040, as well as the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I thank you for your attention, and God bless you.
We agreed at the National Council that when we clap, we really clap. I think ED deserves a bigger clap than that. Especially after giving such a good speech after 20 years of transforming higher education. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we have one of the speakers. If they gave you a choice, you would not invite any other person other than him. He understands the higher education, he understands the financing of it, and is none other than our own Dr. Joseph Muvawala. He's a Katikiro, and the other side is is a prime minister. But now, I want to introduce him as a key educationist, and he completed his PhD looking specifically at the efficiency of Uganda's primary education. Dr. Joseph Muvawala is the Executive Director of the National Planning Authority. He now challenges on a number of occasions on how to strengthen the role of the planning and development in preparation for Uganda's Vision 2040. He has a long CV, but he prefers that we abbreviate it to that, and the rest just tune in your ears, and we welcome him as our keynote guest speaker as we celebrate 20 years of transforming higher education. Dr. Joseph Muvawala, you're welcome.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The teacher in me wants to say that you are alive. Ladies and gentlemen, first and foremost is to congratulate National Council of Higher Education to attaining these 20 years of existence. You know, in this country, we have a habit of throwing away the kid with the bathwater. You start a policy, you start a good thing, and before you evaluate it, you close it down. I come from the other side where I say that we should always evaluate things before we close them down. I think those in our culture know what happened with NADS. Ladies and gentlemen, 2003, I was the economist in the Ministry of Education, principal economist, in charge of planning and budget. And Professor Kasozi had a very tough time convincing many of us that this country needed a National Council of Higher Education. Very tough time. But he taught us a lot about higher education. And I want to thank the Executive Director for thanking all the leadership past for a job well done. I recall Arthur used to come to my office for a budget, and that budget was 1 billion shillings. My mind is very fresh. 1 billion shillings. It sounded a lot of money then. Today, my statements are going to contradict my thoughts then. When I came here and saw the panel, I was a little bit challenged with the seniority of this panel. Many times I go to talk, and the panels they don't give me a lot of hope sometimes. This is a very serious panel, and I hope they don't challenge me a lot. I think today we are going to have a very serious discussion, given the seniority of this panel. So let me thank the organizers and the fraternity of National Council of Higher Education and other stakeholders for organizing this very important event. And I was asked to talk about financing of an investment in the higher education subsector in Uganda. I am so proud to talk about this sector because not many of you have all your degrees from Uganda. If I asked you to put up your hands, not many of you. I don't know how many people from your first degree to PhD is Uganda. By show of hands. You see, we are very few. So I am really proud to talk about this system because I am a product of this system. And everywhere I have worked, the efficiency with which I have performed tells me that this system is alive and kicking. Everywhere I have worked, everywhere. But we live in a country where Ugandans think that one Kenyan is equivalent to 6 Ugandans. Ugandans think. But when you ask them for the evidence, it remains a statement. So we are in a country where we are too harsh on our own systems. So indeed, financing higher education, we understand as the National Planning Authority, because the views of the National Planning Authority have been well articulated by the Executive Director, very supportive of higher education. Very, very supportive. But from the literature that I'm going to be using today, we appreciate first and foremost that higher education is vital in the economic development of any country. It's not that the planners, the financiers, and whatever do not understand this fact. But we also see higher education as the last mile of the education value chain. And I want you to take my words very seriously, of the education value chain. So discussing the issue of financing and investment comes at a very important time when we are at the crossroads of financing education in this country, and particularly higher education. This is especially so because financing higher education comes as a trade-off between the other sections in the value chain. Many of you know that in the 1920s, when higher education started in this country, very powerful in the budget of this country. But after the Kajubi report, when we chose to take the route of democratizing education at the lowest level, higher education started to suffer very seriously. And as we discuss today, I would like to call upon colleagues, don't discuss, let us not just talk to ourselves. In the future, we need to call all these people of the sectors, and for us, we discuss this thing in a holistic manner. Do Ugandans really think that the financing model that we have in this country is sustainable? I will discuss that. And my thesis is that the financing model of education in this country is not sustainable. Many times people think I'll lose my job when I say certain things. But the financing model of education in this country is not sustainable. That is the thesis. And I will discuss as I go on. You can't expect to democratize education at all levels, with a limited budget, at your level of development, to achieve a threshold effect. So in my thesis, I can tell you that higher education is not achieving the threshold investment required to affect the quality of education in this country, of higher education. And it's because there is one budget for which we must all compete. And you know, when people talk about financing and investment, you may be tempted to think they're the one and the same thing. They are related. One leads to the other. But when we are discussing investment in higher education, it is anchored in the capital theory, the human capital theory, which theory tells us that investment in people makes them capital. I'm making very simple. And that when you invest in them, there must be a return. And that return is their well-being and the productivity. So colleagues, we need to ask ourselves as we discuss financing today, are our graduates productive? What is the level of productivity of Ugandan graduates? I think that is a major discussion. If we don't have good answers, then it is likely that an economist will tell you that financing higher education in the context of this country right now may not be the best choice. It is up to us as the fraternity to confirm that level of productivity. And what does financing tell us? The definition of finances and all other things. Now, every time you talk about productivity and that capital theory, in simple terms, what we are saying, the return on education investment must equate the value of the lifetime earnings of an individual to the net present value of costs of the education. And on the other hand, what is financing? When you're dealing with financing, it entails the process of acquiring the necessary funds to support the costs associated with higher education, programs and services, and how you spend it, I must say. So the two are intertwined. One must happen for the other to happen. Actually, one cannot happen unless the other happens. However, every time we discuss higher education and financing, we must not forget accessibility, affordability, and the quality of that education. Remember that terminology, returns. I am not going to bother you with the overall objective of this paper because I submitted it to the executive director yesterday. And for me, this paper should be distributed even as I present. It's not, if it is there, people should have it. The people I see here are better than me in this area. So as I speak, I will even learn just by looking at some of them. So what do we know about higher education and financing in this country? First, it is defined by Act. It is very important. It is defined by Act. To mean what? Higher education are categorized in three broad categories. One, universities, other degree awarding institutions, other tertiary institutions. Other countries choose to define it as anything post-secondary. And that also impacts on the level of financing that would be growing there. What else do we know about higher education in this country? That the numbers have grown astronomically. We may hit at ourselves not performing well, but these numbers truly have grown. And we want to congratulate you on this. The university numbers have also grown, the universities. But we also know that the majority of these universities are private owned. Further, we also know that the enrollment, faculty, and other resources and research are skewed towards the government side. So there is more enrollment in the government side. It is a symptom of something. And one thing we also know is that the unit cost, for some of us who educate kids, I also pay university students. It is cheaper for me to educate in Makerere University than to educate in Viva College in Jinja. What an irony. It is cheaper to educate a university graduate than educating a primary child or even a nursery child. And that is a travesty. I think that is where the problem starts. That unit costs in this country have been so politicized that they are affecting the quality of education. In Viva, I pay 3 million shillings for a senior one kid. Social sciences, Makerere, how much do I pay? Those who know, who are paying fees here. 1 million something. 1 million something. So we know that we have a problem of unit costs. But we also know that unit costs can never be uniform at university level. Because each of you have a different mission, and those missions and objectives should reflect in unit cost. However, a country of this nature should be able to have some indicative that reflect the true cost of delivering higher education. So what do we know? That for every child you take, either private or government, in a private school or government school, you are subsidizing them. And the subsidy comes at the end, which is the productivity of that graduate. For me, that's what I call the subsidy. That we know. We also know that financing for higher education is not increasing at the rate at which, in real terms, it is simply increasing in nominal terms. It's not increasing in real terms. We also know from the evidence, when you read that paper, that quality assurance, both at the national level and at the institutional level, are totally grossly unfunded. And since today we were invited by the National Council of Higher Education, I had to say that. And it's very important, people. In my conclusion, I will tell you something. I don't think this system can survive at a rate at which we are financing the quality units in the universities. Actually, I am having a big problem discerning the budgets of the quality units within universities. It is possible that these units are grossly underfunded and grossly and very unpopular in universities. It must be the worst place to work in any university. Just like it should be one of the worst places to work in the National Council of Higher Education, managing such big numbers, grossly underfunded. We also know, and we have computed, that the returns to higher education in this country are positive. And this paper gives you the numbers. I have given you the earnings of a graduate, the earnings of an undergraduate, the earnings of those secondary, the earnings of others. It is positive. Now, like an academician, every time you're asked to write a paper, you must go to the theory. But I'm not going to dwell a lot in theory, but simply tell you that we understand that there is a theory for financing. And one of the most important theories that we have looked at while writing this paper is the principal agents theory, the principal and the agent. I don't know whether universities know here that you are agents. You are not the principal. The principal are the parents, the kids, and government. But there is a major assumption in its theory which we need to pick as this country. One, the major assumption is that the agent has the capacity to deliver quality to the objective of the principal. So we need to ask ourselves, has the principal, in this case government, and the parent, given enough capacity to the universities and higher education institutions to deliver quality? I'll leave that to you. I think not. Two, do the agents understand the objectives of the principal? I have been talking to my brother here, and he was asking me whether there is a course on the coffee value chain. But coffee is the most important product in this country. So, do the agents understand the objectives of the principal? The national plan is saying value addition. I'll leave it with you. I'll simply make these statements. So this is critical. We need to understand the principal and the agent. This thing is used more in corporate governance, but we have adopted it to education, and you can see it works. Do we understand each other? When I go to the principal himself, who is financing, let us ask ourselves, we have had scholarships time immemorial in this country. Do we ever have manpower studies that determine what scholarship we should be offering? Should we continue using our scholarships, the little scholarships we are, to produce social scientists like Muvawala, when we think they are not very important in this economy? Who are those people that are important in this economy? Is it efficient for you as a financier, the principal, to spend money in areas where your economy does not need or where it is oversupplied? Do those two things meet? As the National Planning Authority, we have studied this area, and we have given you a report on the areas where the country has a shortfall. I didn't even know that they are therapists of flowers. When I started studying, I said, hey, you even need people to therapy of a flower for it to be productive. I did not know that. Those are the kind of people we need. And these lists exist. But is the scholarship system changing quickly? We send people outside the country. What kind of people are we sending out there in the limited resources that we do have? One of the other theories that we look at, which is more deadly to me, is the political economy, that politics and the economy determine what you people have to do. We set the priorities on the side of the politics. And every Ugandan should know that the chief plan of this country is not Muvawala Joseph. It is not Ramadan Govi. It is His Excellency, the President of this country. He sets priorities, and we must be able to implement them. And the priorities now are science, 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 and science. Now, the other that I will jump to talk about, that theory is very important to me because I have an argument that things should be changing. The resource dependence theory. This one examines how organizations, including higher education, acquire and manage resources. Many of us here know that we have had all kinds of visitation, McGregor, whatever, with all recommendations. How you acquire and manage resources. And in my thesis, I'm saying that it is critical. The management of the resources, how you acquire them, regardless of how much you have, is going to be critical for our financing and investment in this country. And of course, we know that every time you look at these things, you have the market and you have the public. I think in Uganda we have both. We have the market, we have public. But we are not applying the market on the side of government. I think if I was working on the budget and I affected the number of students I give to Makerere University would be in trouble. But I dare to say, colleagues, is that the most efficient way of allocating resources? Shouldn't the government scholarships follow the students wherever they want to be? Shouldn't that be the case? I find a university, I qualify, you give me my money, I take it to the university. There are no private students in this country. They're all Ugandans. So that theory for me is very intriguing, and I wanted us to reflect on it without any bias. Of course, it is a good thing to always keep things the way they are. But are those things fair? I am a product of Makerere University. I dare not criticize my university. But things have changed. Are we going to say 2,000 students to Busoga University? The one that I don't support very much. I come from there. I don't support universities just for the sake of having a public university. I am sorry, but I am also coming from that region. But you can quote me on that one. I don't. So, should we continue allocating universities for political expediency? And the day you allocate that university, it must be managed by Musoga. Supposing you don't find good Musogas, why shouldn't you just get a good person to manage that university? The committee must be chaired by a Musoga. All these kind of things. Now, what do we learn from theory? Sometimes I tend to be controversial a little bit. But what do we learn from theory? When you read all these theories, what do we learn? One thing, first, students are potentially well-informed customers. Whether we like it or not, students are well-informed customers. They're not stupid. They vote with their legs. They will go where it makes sense for them. The story in Canada is very interesting. People don't go to university anymore as their first choice. They go to a community college. They don't. And that will happen in this country if we don't re-examine ourselves. People go to a community college because the rate at which they find a job and earn is so fast. What do we know about this country now? From the analysis we have seen, that there are very few graduate jobs in this country. And that's the bad news. And because there are very few graduate jobs, that other side of the earnings discounted becomes a challenge. So you ask yourself a question: can higher education finance itself from the returns that it makes? Apparently the answer is now no. Why? Quality of graduates. And if it cannot finance itself, it means that it's being subsidized by other sectors within the economy. And the cause of the quality of that education, which is key for financing, is because the financing in itself was very low to determine the inputs into that product that you get on the market. So these things are working together. You don't get enough finances, we cut corners. We cut corners, we produce a graduate who is not good enough. Cause and effect. Financing is the cause, then the other side you have also the effect of productivity. And I can be challenged on all these numbers. When you read the paper, I have worked out numbers in that paper. So, what should be the norms when you are developing a financing mechanism for higher education? What are the norms? If you were to assess Uganda's financing system, what norms are you going to use, ladies and gentlemen? Number one, we must finance for equity. All the time. All qualifying applicants should have equal access to education opportunities and should not be denied higher education because of a financial or information poverty. You know, some of us are very poor with information. We don't get it. There must be equity. So let us ask ourselves, our scholarship system, is it equitable? I can see you are giving me the answers. Most of you are shaking your heads like this. That maybe would mean something else in India. But it looks like it is not, because there is a thesis that the majority of the people accessing these scholarships are from well-to-do families. I was not from a well-to-do family. I was from an uneducated, poor family. Some people make a mistake. The other day I had people arguing. Because he's from Namiryango, he's from a rich family. Who told you? Many of us went there, but we are not from rich. It's not a one-to-one, that every time somebody goes to Namagunga, it's from a rich family. It is a choice some people have to make. But the point is that our system may not be equitable. We need to talk about how do we make it equitable. There is financing for equality. There is financing for efficiency. And let me ask the universities that are here and higher institutions of higher learning, how many of you do tracer studies? They're even too expensive. But how many of you? Yes, I want to. But that should be a given. I think Makerere traced me one time. Yes, where is doctor here? Yes, he traced me. Then I said, oh, I am a very powerful guy. I have been traced. But Mr. Kabisheng, have they ever traced you? Yes. They should have traced you. Here is a top lawyer working in other things. So does it mean that every time I study law, I must get a job in law? It's a top lawyer here. But does Makerere University know that they trained a lawyer who is doing very well in other things? So financing for efficiency. Should we then require all of you to demonstrate that your candidates that you have produced are productive before we give you money? Is that plausible? That is for you. Diversity. There are regions in this country that have no graduate in the university. Yeah, they are there. They don't have. When you go and see those IKIs and whatever, my friend, they don't have. They have waited for these graduates to become graduates. You go to these districts and they are keeping the engineering job for their and there is none. And they keep it there. So So I hope many of us have also read the Kasekende paper on returns to higher education. How many have seen it? Dr. Kasekende had a very good analysis on returns to higher education. Actually, that day, we were in Makerere, I think with her. She actually told, when we were discussing whether higher education and development is a myth or a reality. And he wrote a very good paper in the area of returns. And if we see it, it would be very useful to us. Now, we are in a dilemma. Now, we are telling you that your graduates are not productive. We are telling you that the graduate jobs are few in this country. But this economy is creating only, for every 1% change in GDP, this economy creates around 400 jobs. I think that should be another fundamental. You ask us to train. Why isn't the economy creating enough? Don't just allow it to just be bashed. I just wanted, the good thing, Dr. Muhumuza is here representing the PSST. I think we also deserve to explain to the people why this economy is not creating enough jobs. Because ideally, a 1% GDP change should create 10,000 jobs, ideally. Ours is creating 400, and that is structure, according to the economy. So, having discussed all these things, and we all know, like I said, that the financing of quality control is challenged in this country. But because higher education has a return, the basis of which we created the loan scheme, isn't it? We assume that higher education has a return, and indeed it has. So we create the loan scheme. I am discussing with you at a very interesting time when we saw an advert saying no first year. Did you all see it? No first year enrollment. Mr. Muhumuza and myself. Now what will happen to those kids whom we led to believe that when you study, you can get a loan? What is going to happen to them? And the reason was there, budgetary constraints. So the question we ask ourselves, isn't higher education a priority? Indeed it is. If you are going to do STEM, if you're going to do science, if you're going to do industry, you cannot survive without higher education. However, higher education must also respond to the needs of industry. So what are some of our recommendations? Because I didn't write this paper alone. I don't want to believe that I did write it alone. At the end, I will thank those who wrote this paper. I am only their puppet to read it here for you. I think one of the things we need to do at this country and as higher education is that tuitions are not a sustainable way of financing higher education. We propose that we are now going to start thinking of other ways, endowments. When you read the paper, you can see that endowments just in America alone equates to the GDP of this country. Even more. It's $800 billion US in endowments. We also think that is something that is not happening well with the donations to these universities, the alumni. How many of us here are alumni of Makerere University? By show of hands. And how many of you have contributed to Makerere University? How many of you even know when the meeting of the alumni is happening, or even the voting? We only see your president is X. Say, hey, how did it happen? You mean all of us here cannot spend 200,000 and we give it to our mother university? And are we few? I can give $1 million and even more. But how are universities utilizing us as alumni? How transparent are the alumni organizations in these universities? When we give our money, what do you use it for? Because these kids on graduation contribute to alumni, isn't it? But you never know how much money is in that quota. Can't we think of a way of thinking beyond tuition? Going endowments. That when we invest, with endowments, when you invest, you only eat the interest. Don't dare touch the principal. How many of us are running endowments? I have seen Makerere trying. Professor Isari and others, I don't know how we are progressing. But it's so surprising that Busoga College Mwiri is running an endowment. A secondary school is running an endowment. On the 28th, we are contributing to expanding the endowment of Namiriango College. You know, I went to all the best schools in this country. Where are the endowments? I have been involved in some meetings where you sit and a document comes about a professor and you see how the students fight to protect their professor. You touch Dr. Dumba, I'll go with you. Because you impact on our lives. Universities impact on our lives. I am what I am because of Makerere University. I wouldn't have worked for the African Development Bank and be this proud a man I am without that university degree. What are we doing with endowments? Can we think around endowments? Can we think about around donations? Of course, donations also have a problem. When we give you our money, there is no free lunch. Some of you think when I give you lunch, it is for free. Sometimes I want to talk to you and listen to what you have to tell me. There is no free lunch in this world. But should that be the problem? So we propose that kindly, as we look at government resourcing, which is so constrained, tuition, which is a big problem, it has even been politicized. We don't want to touch these unit rates. And in fact, for us, we say, let government behave like a parent. There is too much regulation of tuition in this country. We need government to behave like a parent. I never go to Viva to determine the rate. It is 3 million. If I cannot afford, I go to another school. Not every Ugandan studies there. I think for us, we propose that these unit rates, the work that my sister worked on when she was still a very young, when we were together in university then, on unit costs, needs to be supported very much. Let us understand what is the unit cost of delivering a doctor. In whatever university campus it is, we will come to an average anyway. They're all indicative. And let government provide that resource and put their hands off the universities. I wonder why we continue sitting down to talk about strikes of lecturers. Let us become parents, pay unit costs, let university lecturers pay themselves however much they want, depending on how much income they bring into their universities. Why should we be sitting and determining your professor this much, this one this much, the other one this much? I think that's the only job I'm not competent to do, a professor. I have not published enough. So I think there is something here we need to send a message. My brother Muhumuza, this is an area we need to look at. Is it sustainable to continue providing wage to universities? And I have looked at the numbers. Over 60% of all your budgets is wage. Over 60%. Professor Katunguka, I went to the office the other day, I said, but my senior, how do you manage these things? Because if all the money you're getting goes to, how about the production process of that student? Are we saying that the production process of a student is 68% the lecturer? No other facilities? Development, 5%. These days I walk in Makerere University. It's the only safe place to walk in this town. Thank you, National Planner. They are not walking whatever on these things. So I walk in Makerere University. You go and look at Lumumba. For God's sake, I wish we had taken pictures and we put it here. But can this university afford to repair that Lumumba thing? But we are also asking you as universities to internally become a little bit efficient, cut down certain things. Why should a university run a hall of residency? Is that your core mandate? Running halls of residences? Yes. Other universities have said, but for us, we are stuck running Lumumba, living. The time I went to Livingstone, the cleanest hall where I lived, I wouldn't live there now. That's the reason I even failed to live in Katanga, because I was living in Livingstone as a student. So what can we cut down on some of those things? We are over-managing things that are not core to our mandate. We think we should also tax as a country for education. How many of us have read the BitVet Act? The BitVet Act provides for a levy. Why should you be giving me? I can tell you in this country, I'm the one employing the best graduates from Makerere University Economics, the best graduates. CGPA 4.9, African Consortium, the best on the African continent. I employ them. Why shouldn't you tax me for giving me such very good guys? They write for me, I come here and enjoy myself. Employers should be taxed. Tanzania has done it. How many of you recall when you get a receipt from Kenya, a hotel? How many of you have seen what is on that receipt? There is a levy for training, a training levy for hoteliers. So are you wondering today why all hotels in Uganda are using Kenyans? The financing is assured. The quality processes are assured. If people can pay levy in Kenya, why not in Uganda? And the levy is a very good system. If you train for us, and you know universities, you are suffering. You send children for internship, and they are not willing to accept them. If industry accepts internship, we give you a rebate. If you don't, we tax you. Let us study Tanzania. The moment Tanzania did that, their technical education system just reversed. The financing issue was finished. How can we finance a civil engineer who has never built at a unit cost of a secondary school? These days, even a secondary school, you can't use chalk and paper in the new curriculum. And then for the higher education scheme, why should it be budgetary? For God's sake, how many of us here are paying insurances for education? Yes, I am here. We are giving these guys our money. Purportedly, they are investing it. But I even got some of it. Yeah, I got some. I invested 5 years ago. I got money last week with interest. What is our higher education financing board doing? Why not compete with these guys? Why should we create a higher education financing board? We should be free to do business, to invest, then thereafter we restructure it back in the ministry. I don't want to use the word I want to use. There is no way that higher education financing board will operate properly in a ministry. It's like NSSF. You have to give it its independence and its board. Let them take decisions. Let the likes of Joseph, who have their children in this earth and are scared, contribute, invest that money, give it to me when my child goes to university, wherever I want to take my child to university. Is it possible that we can do this with the Higher Education Financing Board? I think so. Now, there are other issues that we need to look at that are critical. Internal efficiency issues, leadership issues within universities. For us at the authority, we think that this National Council of Higher Education, very important, should be left to do its part, and it should be independent. We think it is not independent, because it is managed by you people who are delivering education yourselves. I am sorry I'm making this point. When I look at the board, the people who are supposed to quality control themselves are on the board. And what do you expect me to do when I sit on that board? Can we leave this unit alone? Can we leave them to do their work? Can they cane us? You may think this is not a financing issue. It's a serious financing issue, because it may compromise the returns to higher education. So we think, discuss these things. They are very hard things to discuss, ladies and gentlemen. But we think you should leave this NCHE free to cane all of us who are delivering education. Mr. Muhumuza, if the country is running a single treasury account, single, aren't we running it, sir? Mr. Muhumuza will tell you, we are running a single treasury, Uganda. Why should you universities run 60 accounts? I'm even about to take it to schools. We are very quiet on this one. I think that is a very important area. Like I told you, the only job I cannot do is the job of a vice chancellor, because I'm not qualified. I am not an associate professor. But for God's sake, you think I cannot run a university? If we are industrializing and we see universities as the industry of knowledge, isn't it? We see the university in the market. I think we need to rethink the leadership of these universities and allow in also business people to run these entities. They do this all over the world. You come with your team, you give us your proposal, we make you a president, you fail, you go with your entire team. These days you go to Makerere, the bursar is in law, whatever is in law, the vice chancellor is not the accounting officer. What kind of mess is this, for God's sake? How can you make me vice chancellor and I'm not the accounting officer? The other guy below me is in law. The academic registrar is in law. I think as you discuss financing, the efficiency, internal efficiency must come in play. The graduation rates must come in play. One of my colleagues graduated yesterday. We were together at a PhD in 2006. Can you imagine? The kids who were born in 2006 are almost graduating. This guy was still struggling with this damn PhD. Internal efficiency. And what are my conclusions? One, ladies and gentlemen, the sustainability of financing and investment in higher education is dependent, very much dependent, on the quality of graduates from these institutions of higher learning. If we don't get that right, we are going to be closed out. Therefore, for higher education to be financed sustainably, the quality of graduates it produces is key. Otherwise, higher education institutions cannot sustainably finance themselves. As a result, higher education is being subsidized from other sectors. I dare to say that the financing model for education in this country is not sustainable. Actually, at the Planning Authority, we have costed what it takes to deliver this democratic system, and it is 10% of your GDP. You want free primary education? You want free secondary? Now you're talking free technical, you're talking free teacher education, you're talking free higher education. 10% of GDP, give it to the higher education, to education, and you'll be able to deliver it. Otherwise, if we continue at this pace, the quality of graduates is going to continue going down because we are going to cut corners. We are forcing even the private. Every time Makerere keeps low fees, you know there is a dominant effect. Private colleges cannot charge very high fees. And therefore they begin to cherry pick and to cut corners to survive. So, in my view, the above is the case for Uganda. We are not sustainable. Whereas the country produces very many graduates, ladies and gentlemen, few are doing graduate jobs. Very few are doing graduate jobs, which results in two wastage occasioned by failure of universities and the economy to create jobs. Universities, productivity of your graduates. The economy is not giving us enough jobs. Against this backdrop, I can confidently say that while financing is a necessary condition for success of higher education, the sufficient condition is the quality of the graduates. It is necessary that we give you money, but for you to sustain yourselves, the quality of your graduates must go up. That's why it becomes a sufficient condition. In mathematics, it's the second order. The first order, give me money. I'll give it to you. Second order, quality. There is no free lunch. Ultimately, financing must improve the quality of education to be able to finance itself from time to time. Universities must align, and higher education must align your graduates' quality to the demand of the economy. The economy, this country, because given scarce resources, must undertake manpower surveys, which will determine scholarships, which will determine the nature of those scholarships. Lastly, let us discuss, I want to give you some fundamental questions. What should be the optimal mix for financing higher education? What should be the optimal mix for financing higher education? What is the nature of leadership that is required to make this factory of knowledge operate like a factory? What is the threshold financing required to make the National Council of Higher Education an independent entity? Right now, it is a begging entity. And a beggar can never be independent. I always see the executive director when the budget call circular is coming out, how she walks the entire country. If we want a good quality system, we must finance quality assurance. I am told that students contribute. Am I right? They do. So who are your bosses? I think the students even contribute more than government. Very soon they will give you demands. Do universities contribute? When the students contribute, universities have contributed. And they are the people you are checking quality. Oh my God. I pay you, and you think you are going to come to me and close me down? You must be dreaming. So, in light of these discussions, I am leaving to you just a few things. And those few things have already been said. I want to thank you for listening to me. I am one of the most proud people talking to you. I never attended nursery school. So whatever English that has gone wrong, my parent is to blame and is already dead anyway. I want to thank the team from the Planning Authority who have worked with me to prepare this paper. Where is Dr. Kasule, doctor to be in a few months. and Dr. Alan, under the leadership of Dr. Ngobi, Chiwanuka Robert, for working with me. Where is my lady? Yes, one of the brightest ladies I've ever worked with in manpower planning. Thank you very much. And for you universities, I want to thank you for training these people. They are top-notch professionals, and I hope I have made a few tough remarks, but I was just simply doing my job. Please don't hit the messenger. Let us simply discuss. I thank you and thank you very much. I am honored to have done this job. And I am hoping that the paper has been distributed. We can even improve it further. And we thank you so very much for God and my country.
As part of the 20th anniversary celebrations, the National Council for Higher Education (NCHE) presents a public lecture on financing of and investment in higher education in Uganda. Join us for this blended event featuring renowned speakers and panelists. Keynote speaker, Dr. Joseph Muvawala.
With all fairness, I know you're academicians. Dr. Joseph deserves a standing ovation. In my 20 years at the National Council, we have not had a candid discussion the way he has done it. I know someone will be able to do it better. Thank you, thank you. We are going to another part, but before that, allow me to introduce some key people so that our budget can remain up there. Can I recognize Commissioner Brighton Wargohari, Commissioner Education, Policy, Analyst and Research? You're most welcome. Timothy Sejoba, Acting Commissioner TVET. Mr. Mkwatampola Mzamir, Commission for Admissions, Scholarships and Student Affairs. Mr. Michael Wanyama, the ED, Higher Education Student Financing Board. And can I also recognize heads of other agencies and chairperson of heads of professional bodies? You're most welcome. We are going into the panel discussion, and allow me to briefly now invite Mr. Robert Kabushenga to come and take the seat here, who is going to moderate. Mr. Robert Kabushenga is an advocate. Some people may not know. You know, these days you like humbling yourself. And he's also the advocate of the High Court. He has a Bachelor's of Laws from Makerere University, postgraduate diploma from LODC, and he has also attended the American Academy of International Law in Dallas, Texas, United States. He's a board member at KCB, and he's also a board member at Old Mutual Life Insurance. He's a fellow of the African Leadership Institute and a member of the Aspen Global Leadership Network. And some of you have been following him. He says, be humble. So welcome, Robert. Allow me, this is not conflict of interest because he's my former lecturer, my former dean, but allow me to request one of our education managers, he's an expert, Professor Waswa Barunya, to come and take the seat. I think we'll come with a big, I am what I am because of him. And he's an Ugandan economist, scholar, is good at management leadership. Some of you who do the Saturday trainings, is in entrepreneurship training. He's also an academic, an administrator, and has worked as a principal, and I think he'll continue to work there as Makerere Business School. You're most welcome. Allow me to introduce to you Dr. Fred Muhumuza. And I know a number of people in this room would want to hear from you. Dr. Fred Muhumuza is a Ugandan national with a PhD from the University of Manchester. He has been involved in developing policy research, analysis, formulation, and review for over 20 years, with a parallel teaching career at Makerere University, Ngomba University, and African Bible University. I didn't know that part. And he has undertaken assignment in public policy as a researcher, practitioner, as well as capacity building for the parliament, civil society, and private sector. Welcome, Dr. Fred Muhumuza. Allow me to introduce one of the ladies. I will not share a personal story. We are together in the US, but also under financing in higher education. Dr. Florence Mayiga Nakaiwa. Florence Nakaiwa is a Deputy Executive Secretary, Planning, Resources, Mobilization, and Management at Reform. Before she joined Reform, she was the Director of Planning and Development in Makerere University, where she worked for over 20 years. She has extensive knowledge in planning, resource allocation, and budgeting in higher education. You talk about budgeting, what Dr. Joseph Mvara was talking about of the 1 billion of National Council, Florence was part of it. You are welcome to take the podium. Allow me also to introduce another panelist, Dr. Ruth Bienzika Kasoro. Some of you who listen to KFM, you know her views. But for today, she's a project director at the Private Sector Foundation, Uganda. It's a World Bank funded project. She's a project director looking at interventions in skills and governance. And previously, she has managed the Pilot Skills Development Fund, a government of Uganda world-funded project, supporting employee-led skilling programs. She has dealt with the development of innovative training programs and worker certification, and mainly in sectors targeting the youth, women, and artisans. That means I know my friends who want the gender component. You get loose, you are done. You are most welcome to the panel. Last but not least, we have a representative of the PS and Secretary of Treasury, Mr. Francis Muhumuza, who is a principal economist in charge of the social services at the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development. Mr. Francis Muhumuza has worked as a statistician in the Ministry of Agriculture before joining the Ministry of Finance. He is here representing the PSST, and he can decide to give us part of the money here and we go home, and the funding will be done. Over to you, the moderator.
Okay, thank you very much, Muguzi. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to start with a disclaimer. I am the only person here who doesn't have a title for a prefix. So I am going to warn you early. I am going to borrow a disclaimer from a public official who recently said, "How do you expect me to supervise PhDs?" So please bear with me. I don't know how you expect me to ask PhDs. Maybe Francis Muhumuza, we are a bit together, but you also have a PhD? Masters, okay. You're still above me. Me, I have only 1 degree. Please bear with me if my questions are a bit of a disaster. That will be because of my shortcomings. Before I dive into the conversation, Joseph By the way, me and Joseph were at university at the same time. And the man confused me and involved me in politics. I didn't realize he was studying harder than I did, so he went off to do a PhD, and for reasons known, I couldn't even qualify for a master's. Those who know how I left Makerere. But you said something about alumni and as a source of funding, and I'm going to use my presence here because Sembatia brought me here, so I'm going to use my presence here to actually advertise a specific person. There is a young man called Peter Kisada. I don't know if anybody knows. Peter Kisada is an energetic character, so if you deal with him, he's a handful. Peter Kisada is only 29, but what Peter Kisada is doing is very interesting for you universities, and if you need his contact, I am happy to give it to you. He's started a business, a startup, tech-based, digital-based, where he is reaching out to alumni of schools and raise funding from them for the benefit of their schools. So, since you don't have the skills, and I know you don't have the skills to reach out to these people, look for Kisada, Peter, and he will do it for you. He will obviously levy a commission, which is fine. It's money you didn't have anyway, and he will get you this money, especially those of you with big alumni communities. I know that PK is doing an incredible job and is getting funded by interesting investors who are looking at his business. So it's just that nobody has been giving him audience. When he comes to make appointments, your personal assistants chase him away. Waswa, your people chased him away. So please arrange to see Kisada. That said, I want to go straight to the questions. And Ruth, I really actually want to start with you. Before Joseph went up to give his keynote, one of the things I said to him was that there is a structural problem with higher education, because the demand that's driving higher education is parents and students, and the government is responding to them politically because they are voters, and therefore creating all sorts of opportunities to deal with that political problem. But you've been working with employers as the private sector foundation. Shouldn't our higher education be driven, the demand, shouldn't it be driven by the needs of entrepreneurs, industrialists, or whoever it is that requires skills to create value? And shouldn't that then be the source of funding? And if so, how?
Thank you very much for those questions. First of all, I was introduced, but there are additional 2 or 3 things I need to add on my introduction.
Please do.
I am also the chairperson of the Council of the Directorate of Industrial Training, and also I'm the chairperson of the board of a new company called NCHE. It's an initiative of the scientists in Makerere, where the president gave them money to start a mango processing plant in Yumbe. And there's a reason why I've said that, because I'll use them.
Yeah.
I have been promoting TVET for a long time at the expense of higher education. But I want to share with you why.
Please.
And I want to share what needs to be done. All right? I think in the presentation, there was an issue of how many jobs are created. Now, a number of people in the industry, any company you go in, we need more people down than up. And what happens, the people that we need up, these are people that have higher education, that probably must be able to manage, to think, because you have a technician. He doesn't have time to do a report. He doesn't have time to do strategy. He doesn't have time to think. But unfortunately, the university system that we have does not even give us those skills that we need as employers. I'm also an employer, by the way, employing over 100 people in my own capacity, but we have an issue there. The other challenge is that a number of universities are competing on courses that do not have the market. And I think there is a need to identify what do employers need, Why do you have so many social scientists? And we don't need them. There are so many. There are courses where we actually need people, particular degree courses. And what I've realized is that it goes wrong at career guidance. Somebody that is guiding people to choose a course does not even know what is happening in the world of work. You just encourage, do this, do arts. It's not bad, but it is not what. And then also there are no studies to show what are the skills for the future. If I sit with you today and I ask you, what would we need 10 years ahead? When I was in Singapore, they would tell you, they even have a particular system that tells you that 20 years from now, we will need these skills. So meaning if 10 years from now, these are the skills we need. At career guidance, you're able to tell these students, but currently right now, we don't know. Probably the ministry responsible is not doing a lot in the labor market information system. And I think it is very critical that we think about that. The other biggest challenge we have is that the funding for students to enhance their work-based learning is not there. We need to think about it. Funding me to do the degree, getting a scholarship is not enough. You have a person who has graduated in agricultural engineering who has never touched a tractor. It is just absurd. You have somebody that has done a degree in marketing. You bring them in your company and you tell them, do for me a marketing plan. How can I increase sales? He has no idea. And I think, why? Because we think internship is just sending kids to offices, putting them at the reception. That is not enough. I think we need to enhance funding. The other big issue I have is that this country has left higher education in the hands of the private sector alone, which is very absurd. I've been looking at economies that we aspire, like Canada. Canada is earning over 400 billion US dollars in education. If you look at the UK, over $5 billion. But in Uganda, we are land-linked. I can tell you, Uganda can become a destination for people in East Africa and beyond to come here and be educated from here. The income we are getting from coffee, we can actually get even a lot more from education if we are able to have right financing structures. I am telling you, it is very, very possible because you grow coffee. I am telling you, because you know when I looked at some of these countries like UK earning over billions of dollars, Japan, New Zealand, it is because they also invest. In Uganda, they don't invest. You get it? Not only for higher education, even other areas. And I think we need to do a little bit more. We don't have a lot of PPPs in education. Investment in education should be like, if UIA is promoting investment options, they have never promoted education for PP. Never. Why not? We should not only look at this as a social good. We should look at a social good that has a high return. And I think that's where we go wrong about it.
Right. I want to turn to Nakaiwa here. So Ruth has just talked about projecting the needs into the future. You people in universities are the researchers. You are the center of research. How come, you cannot project what people will need? Or where's the disconnect between you and the policymakers? Because I think Joseph referred that you did a unit cost and all of these things. Where's the disconnect? Why are we unable to translate the knowledge that we have, the reality that we face, into actions in the decision-making places?
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. I think it is a mindset. And this mindset is both at the university level but also at the policy level. The university becomes just a unit like any other, rather than a source of knowledge generation and understanding. Because higher education is supposed to be not just for skills, it's supposed to be the engine for the country, the engine for economy, where innovations come from. And unless people appreciate not just as a financing for higher education, but looking at higher education as an investment. Joseph did talk about the issue of human capital. So higher education drives that human capital as well, because for all the sectors that we have, it is the human capital that will be able to drive it. So that disconnect between policy and education and what is being offered is because from the onset, it is a holistic thing. It shouldn't be who is in education, who is in employment. What are we doing as a nation? And when we have the policy, the research outputs that we have, why should it be on the shelf as in the journal? You see what happens right now.
Sorry, I'm laughing because do we even understand what higher education is supposed to do for the country?
Perhaps we don't. I just want
help us.
I just want to read to you what higher education can be categorized as. It enables personal development. This is the scaling bit of it. And it's personal. And I think part of the issues that we have had as a country and the disinvestment in higher education was because some World Bank guy said returns to higher education are just private. There are no social returns. So we are just rebalancing that from that concept of you get more social returns at the lower level than you get at the higher education. But higher education enables that personal development, that is the skills, but it also promotes technological and social change. When Joseph said, I was from a poor family, but I went to a good school, it is because someone had gone to school. So education facilitates that social change. The choices that you make as someone who is educated are quite different from someone who is not educated, and that matters at the level that you have. Education as well promotes exchange of knowledge, research, and innovation. So when Ruth says, if you're looking at Canada or you're looking at UK and what they are doing, it is high time. As a country, we benchmark. The policymakers themselves also go out there as much as the people in higher education go out there. What are those good practices that we can pick that will facilitate how we look at education, higher education, as an engine for development? And that is quite critical. If we are talking about Korea or China or wherever, it's because they have invested in their higher education. And this is holistic investment. I know Joseph talked about the scholarships. It's not just about the scholarships. Look at it in its entirety. Look at the infrastructure that we have. Labs. I don't know the last time that labs were improved in Makere. And the mindset. Because I just want also just to read just one small thing before we go on. And this is Albert Einstein. Einstein says, education is what remains when what you learned in school has been forgotten. That is education.
Yeah, but I'll come back to you because clearly from listening to you and Ruth, we don't have a shared understanding in the manner in which you are describing it because we have different expectations. I mean, one time my wife told me about a classmate of hers who said, me, I am studying procurement and I want to go and work in government. The intentions were very clear for that person. So what is it? But I want to turn to Fred Mhumuza. Fred, the last time me and you were in this place, we made the news that has refused to go away. I have tried to kill that video, I have failed. No, about being broke. And it's true, we are broke because you can see the... Fred, Joseph raised an interesting statistic that we are going to need 10% of our GDP. Now, whether we have it or not and whether it's wise, I will come to the other Muhumuza seated next to you. But part of, and I'm coming to you from a political economy standpoint, this country has a deficit of trust in public institutions. And to be honest, Joseph, I have been asked countless times to donate money for Lumumba, and I have refused. For the same reason I have refused to donate to my church, because the reputation with public funds or with managing resources by these institutions is so low that I will be funding a culture of corruption. In that context, how do you make sure, or how do higher institutions, what can they do to just build believability? I'm not talking about anything. I'm just saying, so that if I donate to you $100,000 today, it will do exactly what you're saying it should do. But if I donate to you money and tomorrow you burn a building because you don't want to be audited, why should I? And the public asks those questions.
Thank you. You have almost answered the question you've asked me, because also you gave us Kasada. Now, why should I give my money to Kasada as alumni? You remember you started there. But you're raising a very fundamental question, and I think Joseph here highlights it: return to investment. Whatever contribution I make to an institution, as an economist, I'm looking at a return. And doesn't have to be a financial return. And that's why some people get it wrong. They think we're always looking for a financial return. It could just be, I'm happy, finally my Livingstone Hall has been fixed. That's what I'm looking for. And as a Livingstonian, I want to see that. So the return to investment is one of the things the higher institutions of learning must understand. What are you giving back to the community? That's what higher education is about. I could have begun by asking how many of us here know the names of the scientists behind the COVID vaccine?
Well, I do, but and I know the story, but
exactly.
Yeah.
But that's what we're talking about. Higher education is behind the COVID vaccine. Wouldn't be here without those scientists. And that to them, that's the investment they made, and that's the return. You may not attribute it to them as individuals. We will never know the professor or the labs where they studied and did their work, but here we are. So where is higher education in impacting the things that matter to the people? That's what we're looking for in higher education. And if that be the case, then I would contribute toward the renovation of Lumumba, knowing the expectation that is coming out. But until the higher education institutions keep saying, Muhumza, give us money, which money is part of my tax, and we're looking for those returns in whichever forms, and we don't see them, then the deficit of accountability comes back. And it's not just accountability by the Auditor General's report or by your internal audit departments. Higher education is supposed to impact communities besides its individual benefit to a person. So we need to begin looking at those investments in that context. And to answer your question, I don't see the answer. It's still a pending question that even when we finance these institutions, we are looking out there. But also, just to end on the policy side, higher education is supposed to engage policies and make sure the policies are relevant to the current problems people are facing. We are here talking about skilling Ugandans. I keep asking, who is better skilled than a nurse and a medical doctor? If we know that, why are we here debating internship of doctors? And we are raising money to go and skill Ugandans. These skilled ones who are waiting for 9 months to go and begin the work in the areas that matter most to all of us, we are debating 70 billion to finance them. Can higher education engage those spaces so that we stop looking at political decisions and influence those decisions academically, intellectually, and with solid evidence. Short of that, the question lingers.
Maybe, Muhumuza, we should require that entry into parliament master's degree.
I'm not sure it's a parliamentary thing. He said the chief planners in this country.
He has the best PhDs, but let me turn to the other Muhumuza who is around. And my question to you is very direct. Can we afford 10% of our GDP to higher education? That's number one, considering our various constraints. But when we do these cuts, for instance, like we said, no loans for people for, I think it's this one. When we say no loans for first years, how will we compensate that at a later stage? We've already seen the crisis in primary and secondary education when we locked schools down for 2 years. So how do you find, I mean, that's what we're talking about. That's, I think somebody is sabotaging my ability to ask difficult questions. So
Hello, I think I'm on. Yes, thank you. Yes.
yeah, I have proved the sabotage has stopped. So you
Thank you. So allow me to come to you chronologically. First of all, the question that you asked was about the GDP. Standing from here, the GDP based on World Bank data is about 45 billion US dollars. 10% of that is about 4 billion. Now allow me to look that into you on our perspective as Ministry of Finance. First of all, we have just started the new financial year by a budget of 52 trillion, of which that 33 trillion is to be shared among the 21 programs. My friend here, Mr. Mvawala, and NPA came up with a very robust program approach to budgeting, and that you see there are 21 programs which share 33 trillion. Now I'm going to break that to you. Where I'm standing and the people I'm addressing sit under the Human Capital Development Program. In the budget year for 23-24, they have a budget of 9.6 trillion. That is going to the Human Capital Development Program, of which there you'll find Ministry of Health and other, what we call agencies of that. However, to make that better and trickle it down to the people I'm addressing today as National Council of Higher Education is very interesting. Of the budget of 9.6 trillion, that is 18.2% of the national budget. But from that, the money going to universities, who are the apex of higher education in this country, is 1.01 trillion, which is 11% of the 9.6 trillion. However, of that 1.01 trillion, this is the breakdown of the money I'll give you. 582 billion is going to paying wages, which was raised by Mr. Mvawala. Are we paying wages? Are we paying wages to bring out our graduates, or are we competing to other things? Of that 57%, then we have 37% going to non-wage recurrent. These are day-to-day activities. Then the development, which caters to laboratories and all, is at 5%. So I think you can look at Mr. Mvawala's paper was really hitting the nail home. Now, back to the issue of when you said cuts and repurposing of cuts when we are budgeting, we don't call them cuts. Mr. Mvawala is aware we call them repurposing of the budget. This comes about.
we shall accept it.
So we don't have cuts. We call repurposing of the budget.
New priorities.
New priorities, thank you. New priorities arise. And as you can see, at the tail end of the budget, we did realize that our economy had shrunk and the money that was available to share had reduced due to other priorities, due to paying debt. Most of our debts had matured that we needed to start paying interest on. So that brought about all these, what you would call, cuts in the budget and all that. Thank you, sir.
Today I have learned a new phrase. I am going to apply it at home. Repurposing. When Madame talks, I'll tell her we have repurposed. I want to turn to Waswa. Waswa, you have a reputation. Built a business school from scratch, innovated ways in which you can fund yourself. In fact, I think at some point there was a quarrel as to whether you should keep your money or you shouldn't keep it. Which is another point. I know we don't want us to go there, but two things for me. One, and on the number one, I want you to be honest. Do higher institutions of learning have the skills to run endowment funds? Because you'll give them money for endowment funds. Do they have the skills required to run an endowment fund, or can it be outsourced? Is that a possibility? The second one to you is, from your own experience, share with us and the other higher education institutions, what are the kinds of conversations they need to have about innovations, the kinds of innovations that can generate significant incomes? And I want to remind you about a particular one you had. I remember when I was a fresher, Joseph, we were together, we were freshers. The Waswa and his team introduced at the Faculty of Commerce executive education. It was incredibly oversubscribed. And every evening we would look at these young people coming from town in fancy cars to do evening classes, education. How can other people learn from that approach?
Thank you very much, Robert. May I thank the National Council for this debate. First of all, can the universities manage the endowment funds? I think the financial sector has the players. There are numerous players. If you have money today, the hedge funds exist, so they don't really have to do a lot. They are managing the retirement benefit funds, so I think all you need to do is have the policies, investment policies in place, and it's fixed. Two, I must say that what you're saying is very right. I made personally my fortune out of short-term programs. By 1998, I was not a rich man, but I was a wealthy man. Innovations, I think there is something we need to really look at in terms of the education system in the country. I'll digress a bit. We are looking at financing of higher education, financing and investment. And broadly, there are two models of financing higher education. If you look at the Western countries, the Europe, which uses government to fund higher education, and the US and Britain, which is largely private. Now, in this country, we imposed private system on the government system, because we started this in Makerere in the early 1990s. So we imposed, and interestingly, government made it a policy. I don't know where they got this policy from, but made it a policy. So we have a policy where our government has money, it funds universities, but has also accepted the private scheme. Really, there should have been some thinking on it, I believe, to see what we need to do. I had a small conversation with some people in the Busoga region. Why aren't we having enough Basoga in universities? And interestingly, they said, my senior sister, Sexual Echo, may agree with this. Many years back, they had cotton and coffee, which they used to educate the children. Now it is no longer there, so you don't have the money to take children to school. What does that mean in terms of higher education? What does it mean? So what we really need to do in this country, I think, first of all, we need to fix the lower level schools. I will take away the primary and secondary and merge them into one, so that I no longer have dropouts, especially of girls. Because your challenge of educating children is because we are delivering too many babies too early, and they contribute to poverty. So can I have P1 to P10 or P12, and it's compulsory and is paid for by government? There is no other way. If we are going to create equity in this country, government must fund primary school. Two, government must fund science at whatever level. Call it primary, call it secondary, call it university, it must fund science and technical and vocational education. if it funds science, I'm sure, the president is always talking about science, science, science. We are not doing much in it. But fund the science student at all levels, and you will see something happening in this country.
But sorry, Waswa, just on that specific question, since you brought it up of funding science,
Yes.
what does funding science actually entail?
Pay the tuition. I'm going to come to the investment, but I'm saying pay the tuition. Primary school, we should study free. There is no way you'll create equality in this country of the Karamoja child and the person and the child in Iganga and in Uganda and in Ankole, unless if you give them opportunity and access to education. No way. So, but that primary school funding will create that equality. We must find the money. But we must get out of boarding. It's very expensive. You must get out of boarding. If you look at funding, Joseph just pays 3 million shillings in Viva in
Joseph is rich. He's not the standard.
Yes, but if this school was there, the fees would be much lower. So let me just put my point across. So if we fund science, let everybody who wants to do higher education in other areas pay the money. They can afford it. Government today is funding 4,000 students in public universities for the last 20 years. How? Why? Government every year increases the budget to higher education. That increment in higher education should correspondingly see a higher number of people being funded by government. This 4,000 is, Mr. Wanyama in the education board, I'll remove your board because if we're increasing the numbers of students in the universities, then I don't need the board, the loans, because it is automatic. Every year we increase the number by 10%. Because the board we are creating, the board should come at a later stage, especially for the wealthy people. It should come at a later stage. Now, funding in education, higher education, government has its own institutions. Let government be equitable in the distribution of the funds it invests in these institutions. There is no point in putting money in Makerere and you don't put money in Soroti in, say, in the sciences. Let that be equitable. It's very important. But if, with due respect, if ED allocates more money to Busoga College because he was there, it's not fair. So can we have some more, can we have an equitable system of funding higher education institutions that belong to government? This is where the cost per unit becomes important. And we know that all public universities, public institutions will be funded on the capex at some stage, depending on what they do and the number of students. The private sector will come in because they're looking for money. Let them invest in their own institutions. However, the government, the science student who wants to go into a private sector, let the scholarship follow them. And that's important. Because
so you convert it into a loan at the point of employment?
No, not science. Not science. Science, it should be free, according to me. If it is the arts and others, maybe convert into a loan. But if I have established a university, an engineering college, and I've put equipment in, I expect to see good students, and therefore I expect to see government making some little contribution, because I too am making a contribution to the country. So I think it's very important that there is some equity in the distribution of the funds in universities. So and the private sector can invest, but there is need for government to make some contribution to it, because higher education is not an area where you make profit easily. It's not. It's very difficult to make money in higher education. We started private programs, we made a surplus because we had infrastructure from government.
Okay, yeah. Let me, yes, Ruth.
I wanted to
Before you
just,
speak, let me just,
eh?
as soon as Ruth is done, I'll go to Joseph and then I will come into the audience. Arthur, please alert me when I am supposed to finish because this one we can go on until tomorrow. Sorry, Ruth. Yeah.
I wanted to say that if government could increase money for research, innovation, and operationalizing, let me tell you, and I want to say something positive. I have visited several universities here. I have been to Sitema University, and what I saw was amazing. I went to Muni University. I don't know where the Vice Chancellor is, in ICT. They had a lot of interesting things. I went to Gulu. They had innovations in cassava. I went to Nkozi, innovations in biotechnology. Mbarara, very interesting. And recently I was invited to Makere in the School of Agriculture. These young people were graduating. They had so many interesting things, and all of them were struggling with operationalization. Either they had done the research, they have the idea, and some of these young students were just wanting capital 5 million. The jobs are not there. But these people in universities, some of them have already, they're scientists. They have the ideas. They are also scientists, like in Makere, as I told you, because I wanted to say this story. If you remember the Professor Chamuhanjire's period, food science, the president identified these scientists. They were bright, they had the ideas, they didn't have the money. He told them, I will listen to you and understand what you want. They told the president that we can think through a technology to make sure that mangoes, these small mangoes that are called kagogwa, okay, that they can be used for pulp. Because a number of factories you see, Coca-Cola, Reham, all of them, they just import pulp. And they told them it is not possible. They told the president it is not possible. These scientists said, we are going to do research and see if it works. The president was positive. He gave them money for research. They came up with something, a model, temporarily, truck that went to those villages in Yumbe, collected the mangoes, and it worked. Then the president directed the Minister of Finance to allocate money, 20 billion for a factory. Right now, the factory has been installed. The scientists bought the land. The land where the factory is, the 22 scientists bought the land. They got the farmers, mango farmers in the area, Aringa Cooperative, they are partners. Government is also a partner in this. Surprisingly, the beauty about it is that government is not even the largest shareholder. It has allowed the scientists to talk over this business. And this is what I wanted to talk about. An idea, a business led by scientists. These scientists can do things, but there are no mechanisms to fund research, innovation, and operationalization. And I think that for me, I can tell you, any parent will pay for their girl or son in a university that has good research that can be cost to use. All of us are excited about COVIDX. And then you go ahead to find out who is Ogwang. By the way, I worked with Ogang as an intern at our pharmacy. By the time it even closed. He was our pharmacist. He was an intern. He was an intern at, it was called Malcolm X before. Just near Equatorial. He was our intern. Ogwang. And for me, some of these things I'm telling you, and when you go back to Mbara, there's a lot of research being done. So for me, I'm saying work is being done in higher education, in sciences, and I want to applaud you. But the funding is so limited. How I wish the Minister of Finance, as you allocate, take the president's vision. The president is the only single person in this country that has pushed investment in higher education with priority to sciences, which is critical.
Yes, also.
Yeah, you really, I think, I must say, Ruth stole my idea, but it's okay with that. I was saying, as part of funding, you asked about innovations. Government should fund private universities in terms of their research agenda, and I agree with that. Now, there is a very big problem in the country. The university lecturer in public institutions gets 7 million shillings. The one in private is, I think, 2 million shillings. We are going to kill these private universities. This is something to think about, maybe from, not that they should pay their salaries, but can we fund research across the board? That's what I wanted to say.
what you were saying about mindset change, my frustration actually, and I was hoping I didn't have to give a view at all, is that we approach universities with a trade union mentality. It's workers on the other side, so-called workers, are picketing for more money, and we never quite go into what Joseph was talking about in terms of funding. I have two quick things for Muhumuza and Joe as well, because he's been sitting there quietly thinking you're going to get away with it. There are examples from other places that have been very successful. So for instance, I know in Germany and in America, the location of universities is adjacent to business. So high-tech engineering universities in the US are in the Silicon Valley. Why? Because the money people are there. In Germany, in Bavaria, and so on. So, and many of these examples can be given. Why is it that we allocate universities based on political demands? So, Muhumuza, and you, our people of Kanungu, insisted they want a university. And we give it to them because we want votes. And what is it teaching? Divinity. Really? I am not sure. Then NCHE, they twist them. Give our people a license because they must. But who in Muni has the money to invest in the research that these people are doing? No one. So that's the first thing I want to put to you. Should we reconsider the location? Secondly, and this is specific to you, Muhumuza, can we consider affirmative action where government contracts are given to businesses because they invest in creating job opportunities for local people? And I'm going to use it for an example. The US government gives money to Elon Musk, not because they think he's going to return it, but they know that Elon Musk is creating. So the mechanism by which you create budgetary interventions, you give money to Abu Bakr Technical, you invest in sugar canes in the north, I don't know what. Can we be very specific in the way we say, okay, we're going to give all road contracts to Kabshenga and Muhumuza contractors because they specifically put money in a university X? Is that too much to ask? Because that's how other people fund universities. You give a company that then Hewlett-Packard, that then, or Xerox, that then hires university students. So I'll start with this Muhumuza on that one, then that Muhumuza, then back to you, Joe, before I go into the audience. Affirmative action. Give government contracts to local entrepreneurs, and one of the conditions is you either create jobs or you put money into universities, like for research and so on, or you specifically employ. Because how much money, for instance, have we spent on constructing dams? Did we have engineers?
Yeah, I think you've really emphasized the point that is being raised, that give universities money for research. Research for what? You want to be solving a problem, as we said earlier. And rightly, as you put it, Bezos one time said, which I have $100 million to invest in cities in the US. So the cities had to bid where he should go and put his money. New York won. Even others had given him free land, free buildings. The reason New York won is because of the presence of universities. He said, I'm an IT company. Whenever I have a problem, I want to throw it to those universities and they get back to me with an answer. So we must link the research, and quite often I've found universities present an open-ended fund us for research. What are you trying to solve? I'm here struggling with aflatoxins. Can you come up and say, we want to address this? But also, as Joseph mentioned earlier, it's not the duty of the president to identify which scientists to fund, because that already has brought us problems. That the scientists who have funded, up to today we are still asking, years down the road, where are you? So they have really spoiled the image and the legacy of all, as you said, goodwill. The funding, we should also not just be looking at government. I know what the constraints on the government budget. Most people still will ask Mumza, why can't you give 10%? Why aren't you funding us? I wish he had the money. With wages, as he has read through the detailed budget, with wages already eating everything, debt management taking 40% of the national budget. Security, we have a war budget, by the way. We have thousands of troops in the Congo. They are not funded by the UN.
Let's come back to higher education.
The man's budget is hardly there. So the scientists must present a case.
Yes.
Clear case to say this is how we intend to increase drought-resistant varieties, and NARO has tried to do some of these things on their own, and we have not helped them to transition their science. We are looking for drought-resistant varieties because this country is water-stressed. Irrigation won't be the answer. You are looking for faster maturing, pest-resistant. Can scientists present such kinds of cases? As I said earlier on, the COVID guys had their papers of what they wanted to do human trials, and nobody was funding them. When COVID came, everybody said, guys, where are you now? Money flowed into that space. So money will flow where there is a promise of a return.
But I want to just sort of tweak the question for you, Mumuza, then I will come back here. But the very specific issue is, you know the monies that come into this country. One of the debates that I have been involved in is money funding innovations, which are scattered. Every organization has an innovation fund, like almost a CSR box ticking exercise. We know there is money for skilling in every donor is. Why don't you just consolidate all these monies and say, we think innovation takes place in universities of this nature. All of you who are purporting to bring money for innovation and disbursing it through implementing agencies, I love that phrase. Why can't universities be implementing agencies of these consolidated innovation funds? Why are we allowing everybody to walk in with give a hand? But what the efficient disbursement of this money? You have lots of little funds that are not making impact. Why can't we consolidate them and say, okay, all the money that's coming in Uganda, $20 million for innovation, let the universities bid. Why can't we do that? Why are we allowing everyone and everybody to do their little small things without impact?
Thank you. So for the consolidation of funds being across, I want you to appreciate, first of all, that we are doing baby steps towards this. Just last year, we started doing program implementation budget, where we bought everything. We took out the word called sectors, where people were working in silos. Silos, as you say, and if you look at sector seems to word like scatter, something which is across the place. But now with program-based, we are bringing everyone together. We are identifying where the resources are and to put them where they are. As I said, I think we're in the second year of program-based budgeting, and on our side, we are doing all those consolidations and knowing which funds are where, and we pull them and harmonize them, then we shall have an informed position. I thank you.
Nakaiwa. Then Joseph, I'll come back. I haven't left you yet.
Thank you very much. We've been talking about higher education, and we are looking at the student aspect. It is important we look at the staff aspect as well. Previously, we had one university. Now we have more than 251 institutions. These institutions use the same staff, so they are spread so thin, and therefore the need to create value diminishes because they are overstretched. We need to invest in the staff at the university itself. We create research programs instead of projects, because what is happening now is I write a small project, $50,000, and it's a project. When it ends, it ends. Yet if I created a research program that will take in more students, more staff, then I'll create value, and we can be around a specific problem. If we are solving a problem about entrepreneurship and how jobs are created for the small-scale industries in Uganda, how can we have a comprehensive program for the staff and the students so that we generate knowledge that will translate into innovation holistically as opposed to independent. Of course, when we say government consolidates the different small projects, even at the university level, the management should be able to consolidate the research programs and be able to offer a program. When you're talking about Silicon Valley, it's because they have these research programs that then link them to industry. What Zimbabwe has done has taken these professors and put them in industry for internship so that they can be able to appreciate what happens out there. If you're solving a problem, you must know what that problem is about. Instead of sitting behind the desk and knowing, giving information that perhaps is a little bit too theoretical than if you pick it as a practical aspect, as it were.
Well, Joe, I'll ask you, and then Wanyama, I'm coming for you, so you get ready, because the question I'm going to ask Joe is related. So apart from location, when we're planning the locations of these universities and so on, which is something that I wanted to, you raised an important question, an important issue, that why doesn't government just put money there and say, this year we are funding 10,000 science students at the unit cost that you've worked on, and let the students decide where they want to study? Because you find a brilliant student being forced to move from Kanungu to go and study in Gulu University, because but you're not factoring in the cost of living for this student to move from Kanungu to go to Gulu University to study. So I'm proposing two things, and I don't know if they will work. One, yes, I agree with you that money should be just put aside and say, for us, we're going to X for university students. Two, let the money go to Wanyama's fund, and Wanyama then processes who will be entitled, and let the student decide where they want to study. So if universities want that money, they should now market themselves for these students in order to get this money. Don't you think that will create efficiencies?
Yeah, definitely. Then you have created a market for students. Create a market, let universities come and buy.
And those who have nothing to offer will die.
You close.
Yes.
Free entry.
Free exit.
Free exit.
Well, compelled exit.
We suffer
really
too much keeping inefficient entities running. For me, I think it is tough, because we have created a legacy of we must fund the professors, we must do this. We have made universities lazy. If I am the VC of Makerere, I know 2000 is coming. What is that? It is there. But let Makerere compete with the Chambogo, with the whatever private, you will get efficiencies.
They said earlier on.
It is tough, but it has to happen, because colleagues, I have told you, this budget cannot expand anymore. If you are seated here waiting for money from this budget, you had better shut up those universities. This budget has become constrained. The fiscal space, we don't have the leverage that we have been having. We are paying for our sins. We borrowed, we are paying. Whatever, we are paying. We have areas to pay.
And we're not producing wealth at the level at which we should be.
We are not growing fast enough. So unless oil comes,
let's stay with higher
and now
education.
that there is no oil, we must think innovatively here, in this room.
Right.
Otherwise, our existence is threatened. You are not going to survive on the budget, I can tell you. I live with this budget.
Wow. Well, I'm looking forward to a course being introduced on how to manage borders. Yeah, why not? But let me turn to the audience. I think it's only fair that we hear from them. We've got only a few minutes. They always give me the difficult task of managing time. So I'll start with Michael Wanyama. Do we have a microphone? And who is managing it? Who has the microphone? Do you have the mic? Yeah. Okay, so very direct question. Are you capable of investing the money if it was given to you for a higher return? If not, what skills do you need? There is a Ugandan president who had very summary ways of dealing with the saboteurs, as he used to call them. But yeah, those ones don't pay them the full amount. The sound people there. By the way, talking of which, there isn't a course in this country on sound engineering.
Am I allowed? Put on. Oh, yeah. Thank you so much, Robert. The audience, my name is Michael Nyama. I'm the Executive Director of the Higher Education Students Financing Board. And I think for now a week, I've been in the news. Robert said the Wanyama's fund. This is not Wanyama's fund. This is a government fund meant to give out loans to students who are pursuing higher education. I want to thank the entire panelists, but more especially our guest speaker, Dr. Mvawala, because there are a number of things I want to associate with him. One, government can no longer afford free education. We moved away from there. He has put it in his conclusion, government has no money. But it came up with the solutions. Why did we abandon free education? One, the enrollment ratios were growing. We had to find solutions for the so many students who wanted to find to get higher education. Higher education landscape, of course, increased, and I want to thank the private players, especially the private university. I think also.
Okay, now you answer my question.
I wanted to give a preamble. I wanted to give. Yes. One, these are loans that are supposed to be repaid. The intention of the government was to create a revolving fund. The only thing we have to do is to ensure that we manage these loans effectively well by having a stronger governance and institutional framework in place. Doctor said it very well. If that is done and we ensure that those who have borrowed money pay back, this money will be revolving. And those who have borrowed will be given, this money repaid, will be given to other learners to access education. The skills are available. The people who do the work are available. We have competently managed this scheme for the last 9 years, very transparently, with very good governance structure, with very strong legal framework that needs to be supported by
What has been your collection rate?
Our collection rate, we have just started collection of recent, and that's what I'm talking about. It's about 28%. If you look at our projection, last year we had projected to collect 1.5 billion. We did collect 1.2. So we are moving in the right direction. These are soft loans that are repaid in a longer term. If we give you a loan of, say, 3 years, you repay this loan in 6 years plus a grace period of 1 year. Those are 7. So initially, you don't expect a lot of collection. But over the year, like our projection stands at, in the 2029, 2030, we project to be collecting about 8 billion. So what I'm saying, it's all about managing this scheme well, and the collections will be able to grow so that we finance this year. So what are we saying? Let's put this money in this, let's put money in this fund. Let whoever wants to borrow, who doesn't have money to access higher education, go to the student loan scheme so that he's able to finance the cost of higher education. Remember, government is only sponsoring 4,000 out of over 40 who want to access education, implying about 36 have nowhere to get the money from. We only give money to only about 1,000. By the way, it's only this scheme that gives money to students both in the public and private. Doctor put it right that way.
First, wait.
You know, Mr. Wanyama is not doing us service. The question was, can you manage this fund?
Yes.
If you were given money.
That's right.
Right now, what you are doing is allocating a budget.
Yes.
You're not running a fund.
We have
give you a budget which you give to people, and then they return it. But what we are proposing for this country sustainably, if
Is-
you were given money to manage,
Can you be like
I
an
give you my
NSSF?
money, Muvawala Joseph, I give you my money. Can you invest it? And
Yes.
when the time I want, can you give it back to me to educate my children?
And do you have the
Instead of
mandate?
depending on the national budget.
We have the ability to manage this money. I want to tell you that we have even invested part of it. 1.9 billion already is on the fixed deposit. We are managing it well. We are able to manage this one and grow it so long as we improve on our governance structure. The people to manage are available. These funds can be reinvested. If you give us this money, as the students pay back, we're in the position to reinvest this money. We're in the position to insure these funds. The capability and the capacity and the skills is available. And we have demonstrated that the little you have given us, we have managed it well.
Okay, so I am proposing, Joseph, you as NPA, that everybody who gets a child in Uganda, we tax them a small amount of money, which we give to higher education, so that by the time the child is 18, we will have saved for you a certain amount. Okay, I want to hear from Sarah Achemo. Sarah represents the students. And let's hear from, she's right there. Sarah, you give us your perspective. I know that in the council meetings, I think they may squeeze you on talking, but now I've given you you talk.
Thank you so much. Just to maybe report, they don't squeeze me. They're actually very accommodative.
Okay, what would you say, but go on.
My name is Sarah Chemo. I'm a student's representative to National Council for Higher Education, and I'm a student of Uganda College of Commerce, Soroti, currently pursuing diploma in hotel management and institutional catering. So first of all, I have listened to wonderful submissions from the team up there, and I just want to maybe react on a few things basing on a student's perspective. To begin with, on the issue to deal with the students having to take the choice for the institution that they would like to enroll, that is, after the government has put in funds to allocate to these universities, I think it's actually a very good one because, one, most students are being forced to leave probably a place where they could be able to easily access the education at in an affordable way, and probably move to, say, I want to give an example. For example, I come from Soroti, and maybe I would be able to access the course of doing engineering at Soroti University, but because the government has posted my name to, say, Mbarara University, or let's say just Makerere University here, I am being forced to move from the other side to this way, and yet I could still access the same education at Soroti at even an affordable way, in that the cost of living would be a bit low. So I think it's a plus to a student if that initiative is being put in place and students given the chance to choose an institution where they feel they can be able to attain this education in an effective manner. And then maybe the other thing on the issue of the Higher Education Financing Board, first of all, I want to thank the government of Uganda for having come up with this, because it has helped quite a number of students. However, I am sad to say that given the news that I've been making, aired out in the past 1 week about the failure of the Higher Education Financing Board to work this year, you realize that quite a number of students are going to be affected. Already we have been affected with COVID-19, and that means that most parents are not going to be able to pay for their students. So at least with this on board, it gave hope to these students that even if at home there I do not have the money to continue with education, I can still work extremely very hard, excel, and then go on and get this loan and be able to pursue my dream career. This afternoon I was reading in the newspaper about 1,200 students, their transcripts have been withheld by some of these universities. It is really sad because the students are not the ones who have refused to pay this money. it is the government that came up with this initiative to finance them to access this education. So I think it would just be fair that the students be given their transcripts and then let the universities, first off with the government, which came up with this policy. I am at least happy when I read in the newspaper, Gulu University was doing otherwise. For them, they are saying, the students, you know the problem here. The issue is to deal with the government, so we shall face off with them. You have your transcripts. So I think the rest of the institution could probably learn from Gulu University, because it's not the student that has refused to pay the tuition. It is the government that has to repurpose, I want to borrow his word, to repurpose this money properly so that this money can be taken back to the universities for the services that they've offered the students.
Okay,
and then maybe the other thing, as I finalize, on the issue of research, innovation, it is very critical, especially when we want to be able to create employment, because through these innovations and research, you realize that the students are able to come up with new ideas and new things that people can be, the other people can be able to join in and get employment. But sadly, it pains me to know that there are we have actually very innovative students in this country, but the challenge comes in that when they go out there and make their proposals, they are not being listened to. You know, they over-politicize everything. They move you from A to B to Z. At the end of it, you lose the morale. And then that whole idea just dies in there. I know of a few students who have moved, yesterday they were sharing with me. They have brilliant ideas. And when you listen to them, they're looking at creating something that can curb unemployment and keep the youth engaged. So if we can probably set up a separate entity that can be able to listen to these ideas from these students and fund them, I think we'll be good and we'll be able to realize our Uganda's Vision 2040. Thank you very much.
The institution is here. It's called NPA. Okay, so I am going to take two more. I am going to go to the back there. Right at the back, then let me see, my discretion will, so go right to the back after, there's a lady at the back there, and then let me see, let me also exercise some dictatorship, because really the power may not last very long, so, and here there are no extension of terms, so, yeah, because also the time we have is very limited, so, yes, intro.
Barbara Barungi, Imara Africa Consulting. We focus on financial advisory services. My question and challenge is to two gentlemen that I happen to know quite well, Joseph Muvawala and Balunya. Yeah. Is it inconceivable that the two of you and a few others could sit down, craft a framework for PPP partnership forward, okay? There are a few universities. I can give you an example of the New York University, both in the US and the New York University in Abu Dhabi, Kabushenga, which you know well because I was teaching there recently. It is not rocket science to get into partnership with corporates in Uganda. In Kenya, we are fighting over each other to try and support universities. Why can't that happen here? So I really think it's a mindset. As for the person who talked about repurposing the budget, please do not let anybody arm twist you. There is no way government of Uganda will ever be able to finance higher education adequately. Let's change our mindset. Thank you.
Okay, Arthur, so there's a gentleman at the back in black. Let's give him the mic. And then power will return this way.
Thank you very much. And I'm also part of your dictatorial tendency of this afternoon, and I've benefited. My name is Ambrose Vyamjisha. I'm also a consultant in education. Higher education, I wanted to emphasize that it is still very low in Uganda, and I have heard you have many universities, but the purpose of creating universities and the vis-a-vis of what they are producing is totally different. You find most private institutions even governments, they are producing courses which are not even needed in the market. And you find, if you are a graduate, most of us, you go to your village, you find you are the only one with a degree, which means there are many, many people who are yearning for higher education and financing. So Dr. Muvara was saying that financing would not be enough. No, we need more financing to increase the higher education in this country. You find doctor in your, I don't know, your clan and your village, find you are the only one with a PhD. And most people, they are below.
But is that a problem?
It is a very big problem.
How?
We have
if
seen.
Machiga have only 8 PhDs, so what?
For example, we have seen someone who is a graduate of P7, who is a rich man in town, and we have got 5 PhDs who are not even able to produce. So we lack science and technology in what we are doing.
You've answered yourself.
Thank you very much. If
Good.
you have seen, for example, at Makerere, you have been mentioning border borders. We don't produce border borders in Uganda, and most people use border borders. So we need to increase science and technology at a higher level. We need more graduates, more PhDs in order to solve these problems we are seeing. Thank you very much.
Barugahari, Commissioner, you tell me, I'm going to give you the mic. Among the many things you're going to say, how does a tribe having many degrees? This I don't know, because because I know some tribes where they have many degrees, but they still grow sorghum. Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Robert. My name is Brighton Barugahari. I'm the Commissioner for Education Policy and Research at the Ministry of Education and Sports. I think I like the theme, financing, but we have not talked about investment. And I think Dr. Mwara has clarified, but before we say it, we must start by admitting. And you have also hinted about a deficit. And I think we are very dishonest. How we get over that is also another issue. Our higher education system is unable to solve our problems. And that is the bottom line. Why? Because there are many structural issues that we seem not to be either discussing or we are avoiding. And when Dr. Mvara talked about it is structure, I thought he should have gone ahead. Some of those structures, for example, if you look at our law, which establishes public universities, it is saying a public university is that is funded and maintained by resources from the consolidated fund. So funding is one thing, but also maintaining an inefficient, because that is by law. That is now a structural issue. The second issue is about the relevance, which many people have talked about. The third issue is problems. Financing for what? The fourth issue is investment. Most of these universities, apparently, which are struggling with resources, have a very huge asset base. Prime properties, not invested. They are not partnering. They are only looking at, and I think they are like trade unions. So those structural issues, then of course, to make what is worse is politics. And the politics, we have not simplified it, we are complicating it. Because we are aligning ourselves with how to benefit from the political incentives associated with saying wrong things. Higher education should at least be the space where you expect honesty, where you expect evidence, where you expect solutions.
Why are you talking in tongues?
I'm not talking in tongues. I am actually saying the analysis we have done, that number one, unless we deliberately confront the barriers and the constraints which are structural, financing is not going to be, it is a solution, fine. But how then do you address the structural issues? The structural issues, if you are not discussing them, the governance issues, these universities have councils which are like a crowd. 28 people sit in the council, they are the decision-making organ. Constituency this, constituency this. That's a problem. They have issues of regulating themselves. Therefore, they don't make the right decisions because they are conflicted. So the staff are rovering all over, and they are saying, if you stop that practice, you are killing us. All those are structural problems. You have a lecturer in Makerere who is never there. He has no time to think, he has no time to research, he's loitering all over. And then you come here and say you want financing. Meanwhile, that person is assured of a salary. All those are structural issues, performance contracts, purposeful financing. Those who have assets, they should, even the ownership, let me now talk about that. The definition of ownership is that universities exist in perpetuity, but at the state expense. They don't have to do anything to survive, but they will exist in perpetuity. Here in Mr. Mumuza will allocate money. They don't care. They will say that money is not enough. But if you're in a private company, if you're an enterprise, your survival is pegged on making right decisions. Now, these institutions are not motivated to make right decisions, and they are guaranteed of survival. I think the issue of investment through partnerships is important, but also unblocking the barriers in the higher education space is also a priority. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barugahali. So I am going to exercise absolute dictatorship because the management of resources in this part of the world is atrocious. And one of them is time. So, by the power vested in me by the National Council of Higher Education, because I'm now exercising their power, two people here are going to summarize. Nakaiwa and Buvawala. So we start with you.
Thank you very much. And like you have said, investment is quite important, as Brighton has said. I should say that I was on the Makerere University Endowment Fund. And endowments are possible in this country. And like Professor Balunyu said, you don't have to do it. You are just a manager of that endowment fund. So we have finance managers, financial management instruments that can be able to manage that. But also be cognizant that even those financial management consultants came from universities. So even as we bash universities that they are hopeless, all of us here came from a university somewhere. So if they were that hopeless, we wouldn't be sitting here discussing. But we know that there's need for improvement of the university system, dynamism.
Maybe we're a dying breed.
The dynamism, it's just taking into consideration the dynamism of the environment in which we operate and be able to attune all the processes that we have externally and internally, the internal efficiency and external efficiency that they were talking about, to facilitate this higher education as a constituent aspect of society and development, because we need it. Thank you very much.
Joe.
By the powers invested in me by the moderator, I spoke too much. I would like to pass on to my senior to summarize. Thank you. I've also used
It is okay.
Thank you, my young brother, Joseph. Maybe for me, we've sat here this whole afternoon and we've discussed these issues. What is the way forward? Can we pick the various issues and continue to discuss them? For instance, we're talking about PPP. How do we move ahead? Because we're here talking about them, but this may be the end. Is there a framework for promoting PPPs in higher education? We're talking about the financing board, and people are saying maybe we have the money somewhere. Can we give that money to the financing board to finance? There are a variety of other issues, but there is definitely need for a reform in the education system in the country. And so how do we move that? This body does not have that mandate. So where do we take it? That to be able to improve higher education, we need a reform in the entire education sector. Where are we taking this recommendation to? To be able to fund sciences, what do we need to do? To be able to fund research in public universities, what do we need to do? I think these are issues which we definitely must speak up. so that this public lecture at the end of the day has meaning. And I'd like to thank my young brother for the interesting discussion this afternoon. I think I'll request, since many of us are academicians, can we pick it up and go further to look at financing of higher education in this country? What do we need to do? I hope that we can have some money from finance to do this research available to all these public universities. I thank you very much.
Thank you. So, actually, just to pick up from Professor Balunywa and say and challenge my good friend Ruth here, because I know Ruth is very innovative in the way she thinks. Ruth, please go back. There's a board member of yours here, so please go back to PSFU and find some small money for a 3-day discussion, so that we have 3 days discussing this very issue as a follow-up from this one. Muvawala has given us the basic foundation, the theoretical foundation for this. Professor Balunywa has shown you that he can lead that conversation. The resource persons, the two Muhumuzas are here. You don't even have to go very far here. Nakai was also here. I am sure if you coordinated with Professor Okwako and Sembatia, they will kick in. Barugahele is already fired up. I am sure he can't fail to find some repurposing from Muhumuza there for such a conversation, so that, as Baganda say, that Mbozi Tebankade, we can continue. A conversation doesn't grow old. From today, this conversation can continue. All I can say is thank you very much to you, Dr. Florence Nakaiwa, Dr. Ruth Viinzi Kakasolo, Professor Balunywa Waswa, Dr. Joseph Muvawala, Dr. Fred Muhumuza, not yet Dr. Muhumuza, the other one, and me, who is nothing, but I am sure that I have supervised these PhDs and we haven't had a problem. So thank you very much. I would like to hand back to Arthur for the subsequent events. I think for us, let us step down because we can't stay here forever.
As part of the 20th anniversary celebrations, the National Council for Higher Education, NCHE, presents a public lecture on financing of and investment in higher education in Uganda. Join us for this blended event featuring renowned speakers and panelists. Keynote speaker, Dr. Joseph Muvawala, Executive Director, National Planning Authority, and the panelists will include Mr. Ramadan Gobi, Permanent Secretary and Secretary to the Treasury.
For the presentation, from the key speaker, it will be put on your emails. And I think our secretary should have already done it so, but you'll be able to receive it on the emails, and since you registered them. I want also to recognize Professor Moses Gorora as our former deputy and also sometimes acting as ED. Thank you for being present. At this moment, allow me to call Dr. Vincent Sembatia. He's our Director for Quality Assurance and Accreditation, to thank this great audience. And I don't see him around. Oh, I was wondering. Come and say thank you. Immediately after the vote of thanks, Saul, we are supposed to have, is it a group photo? Then after the group photo, the chairperson of council and the ED have, part of celebration, invited you to a cocktail in the gardens. Since it's part of the celebration, so that we don't only feed into academics, but also we'll be able to share some ideas, because I know there are so many other ideas that were never said. Dr. Mpeza had an idea. These panelists will be still around and we can be able to share with them. Dr. Vincent Sembatia.
Thank you very much, Arthur. And all protocol observed. Sometime back, around the year 2000, there was an article that was published by the World Bank, and the author was David Coates. David Coates was grappling with the issue of financing higher education, and Uganda was used as the base as the best example at that time, Makerere University provided a very good example of how to deal with this issue of financing higher education. And at that time, as Professor Barunwa was here, he was the innovator, providing access to higher education through privately sponsored students. From there, I think Faculty of Commerce at that time at Makerere, he moved out to create a very vibrant institution. Now, 30 years later, I think the times were 1980s when private education was started. So 30 years later, we are here grappling with the same problem. So again, now Uganda should come up and step out of the woodwork and create new innovations. I think now that we have all these people have come to the platform, I'm happy that we are rethinking. It's not going to be any of those solutions from the shelves. The easier things have already been done. And now it seems like everyone is puzzled. No one seems to have a ready solution. So it seems this discussion, which seems to have maybe started in very serious, earnest, we now have to proceed. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the keynote speaker, Dr. Joseph Muvawala, the Executive Director of the National Planning Authority, for giving us an opportunity to ignite this debate. I'm sure that everyone is going back here to try to scratch or to burn midnight candles, as our Executive Director normally wants to say. You go back, burn the midnight candle, think for the country, think for yourself, think for the nation. Try to see. Everyone seems to agree that higher education is very important for economic development, and that has been, no one contests that. The panelists, various, Mr. Ramadan Gobi was supposed to be a panelist. He's been ably represented by Mr. Francis Muhumuza, Dr. Ruth Binzi Kamusoke from the private sector. Most of these have come up with specific points. I won't go through that because that will be, again, re-summarizing what has been summarized already. But she mentioned something that was very worthy thinking of. And the keynote speaker had already mentioned something to do with coffee, that he had not come across with any curriculum in this country dealing with issues coffee. And I know our very able moderator is in coffee. I know of a farm in Brazil, Datera, is one of the biggest coffee farms in the world, and Brazil is the largest coffee exporter. Gets over 2.5 million 60 kilogram bags. But Datera has from nursery school to university, issues coffee. So the curriculum is designed just to promote Brazil coffee. So I didn't take that lightly. And again, Dr. Musoke talked about that we could probably get more money from education than from coffee. Yes, that would be very encouraging, but we could do both. We can intertwine education and coffee to combine both views. From the three people, the presenters, Professor Waswabarunya, of course, you know him, he's an innovator. We really would want him to come up with another trick from the bag and see what else can we do after 30 years of this innovation. Can we pick up something else? I think he has already kind of given suggestions on how this can be proceeded. We can proceed with this. Dr. Florence Nakaiwa Maiga, yes, he's an economist, so we have these economists who have written all these plans. I think she's been associated with strategic plans in the Ministry of Education, higher education. So the ideas, we keep flowing, and from Reform, the Deputy Executive Director, Planning and Resource Mobilization in Reform. And the two distinct muhumuzas, I think the word muhumuza has some deeper meaning than we take on the surface. To me, it would think something that is makes you peaceful, right? I hope I'm interpreting it correctly. So here they've actually maybe added meaning to that by creating us opportunities, even though one of them scared us the more, saying that we are not looking at the government side anymore for expansion. But then our keynote presenter had already told us that we should be looking at 10%. 10% and translates to $4.5 billion. That's a lot of money. We can do transformation in the education sector. Can we go the way of some countries like Mauritius, which will devote a whole year of budgeting to a specific line item, say this year and next year and the 3 years from now, we do education. Then we move to primary health, then we go to agriculture. Could we think about that? So those are some of the innovations that we're really hoping that we come through. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the key stakeholders who have made all this discussion possible, the Minister of Education and Sports. There are various distinguished commissioners here, including Commissioner Amos Balgari, and I know my friend Commissioner Mkwatampola and Sejoba. Yes, all these commissioners have supported us and they continue doing so. We thank the leadership of universities, other degree awarding institutions, and other tertiary institutions. These words "other" should not scare you. You are the only one. So it doesn't mean that there are other people we have not mentioned. So you are here, you've been supportive, you've contributed. The councils, professional councils, I saw Professor Okulo was here. I don't know whether he's still around, but National Council for Education works alongside professional councils in accrediting programs and institutions of higher learning. So there are about 10 councils that we work with, all professional councils. Very supportive education development partners, we're expected to be here. Various stakeholders that have formed this wonderful audience of today. And most importantly, our own council. You know, this can be confusing. The National Council for Education has a council. That is like the governing body. The executive director mentioned the members of these, and we're recognized. We thank you. The organizers of this event include the executive director, is the leader of all this organization, and then all the members of the National Council for Education were introduced earlier. You know, they are wearing those very nice shirts and tops, which I can't describe the color because it may be green or blue, but I'm sure you recognize something different in the form of a uniform. They've done a great job. Of course, we've seen all these heads and representatives of all other tertiary institutions. There could be some other people that will be recognized during the next event, which is a cocktail, which is happening immediately after here. So that's why I'm not going to take any further time on this, except, of course, to thank you all for being such a wonderful audience. We have seen over 300 people. You know, this hall can house even up to 1,000. So you may not know that we have so many people have come. You came on time. We were able to start on time. Anything that went not the way we expected, we hope that you can turn a blind eye onto that. So I will take this opportunity to thank you, and we are going to combine the clap. I know that my colleague Arthur wants people to clap so hard, right? And I hope you're capable of that. So let's give ourselves a round of applause for all those who have participated. Thank you very much. In special thanks go to our moderator who has shown his ability, Mr. Robert Kabshenga, the farmer, in addition to those things that were mentioned about him before. Thank you, and I take this opportunity to welcome you to the next event and hand over back to Arthur, my colleague. Thank you very much.
As part of the 20th anniversary celebrations, the National Council for Higher Education, NCHE, presents a public lecture on financing.
It deserves a bigger clap, as you say. And we come to the end. We have evaluation forms in your bags. Make sure you fill them so that Emma and Dennis can be able to pick them up. We also want to announce the next event in the series of events. Will be a cancer run on 20th of August. And make sure that you, once the program is out, detailed kits will be available to your institutions, be able to participate as we warm up for the finals. We want to thank you very much. As we get out, we shall take a group photo at the stairs. Then from the stairs, cocktail is compulsory. And if you want your program not to have issues, make sure you attend a cocktail. If you don't attend, then we know your program has issues, which I don't want to mention. Can I request Reverend Father Kimbo Emmanuel from Mugaba Seminary to come and give us a blessing for the cocktail and the journey masses? And this marks the end. And we want to thank you. Well, we have not done well, just forgive us. We shall do better at the next event.
As part of the 20th anniversary celebrations, the National Council for Higher Education, NCHE, presents a public lecture on financing of and investment in higher education in Uganda.
First of all, to thank God for all that has transpired today, this evening, the discussions, and to thank the organizers for this event. And as we thank God, we ask for His blessing on all that we intend to do, because without God, nothing is possible. We thank you, dear Father, for all that you have enabled us to do, and now we ask you for your blessing. Bless this audience, bless all the plans, bless the cocktail that we are going to partake of. Bless Uganda, bless its future. We ask this through Christ our Lord. The Lord be with you. May Almighty God bless you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Good evening.